The knock came at 11:43 p.m., sharp and heavy, the kind that does not belong to neighbors or delivery drivers or anyone who plans to apologize afterward. I remember the exact time because I was looking at my phone when it happened, scrolling without reading, waiting for my wife to come out of the shower so we could finally talk about something small and stupid like groceries or weekend plans. The knock cut straight through the house, through the walls, through whatever sense of normal I still had that night. At first I thought it was a mistake, maybe someone at the wrong address, maybe a drunk neighbor, maybe nothing. But then it came again, louder, slower, deliberate, and my stomach tightened in a way I had not felt in years. There is a sound that instantly tells you your life is about to change. That was it. I opened the door barefoot, half annoyed, half uneasy, and saw a uniform standing under the porch light. A police officer, mid-40s maybe, calm face, clipboard in hand, eyes already scanning past me into my house like he expected something or someone to appear behind my shoulder. He asked me my name. I told him. Then he asked if my wife was home. He said her full name, first and last, clear and confident, like he had practiced it. I remember thinking how strange it was to hear her name spoken by a stranger in uniform at almost midnight. I remember thinking something had happened to her, an accident, a robbery, a wrong place at the wrong time. My heart jumped ahead of my thoughts, already preparing for bad news. I told him she was home. He nodded once and asked if he could speak to her. I did not ask why. That is the part that still bothers me. I stepped aside without hesitation, already playing the role of cooperative husband, the guy with nothing to hide, the guy who believes his life is boring enough that police officers only show up in movies. He walked in, boots heavy on the floor, and stood in the living room like he belonged there. The house smelled like soap and steam from the bathroom. The TV was paused on something I had not been watching. Everything looked exactly like it should have. That is what made it worse. I called her name. No answer. The officer watched me closely, not aggressively, just observant. Like he was measuring the space between my reaction and the truth. I called again, louder. She answered from down the hall, her voice normal, relaxed, annoyed that I was interrupting her routine. She came out wrapped in a towel, hair wet, phone in her hand, stopped when she saw the uniform. Her face changed instantly. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. It lasted maybe half a second, but it was enough. The officer said her name again and asked if she had been involved in a traffic incident earlier that evening. He kept his tone neutral, professional, like this was paperwork to him. Like this was just another stop in a long shift. She hesitated. Just long enough. I looked at her. She looked at the officer. She did not look at me. She said yes. The officer asked where she had been around 8:30. She gave an answer that did not include me. She said a street name I did not recognize. She said she had been visiting a friend. A friend I had never heard of. I felt something disconnect inside me, subtle at first, like a wire coming loose. We had spent that evening together. Dinner at home. A movie. She had left for maybe 40 minutes to pick something up, she said. I had not questioned it. I never did. The officer asked if she would unlock her phone. She froze. That moment stretched. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear my own breathing, slow and controlled, like my body was trying to convince itself this was still manageable. She hesitated, then unlocked it and handed it over without arguing. The officer glanced at the screen, typed something in his tablet, then looked at me for the first time like I mattered in this equation. He asked me if I knew where my wife had gone earlier that night. I told him what she told me. Grocery store. Short trip. Nothing important. He nodded again, but this time it was different. Less polite. More final. He said there had been a reported hit and run. A car matching hers. Involving another vehicle. No fatalities. But reported injuries. He said the other driver claimed a passenger was in her car. A male passenger. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. I waited for her to say something. Anything. A correction. A denial. A laugh at a misunderstanding. She said nothing. The officer asked her who had been with her. She swallowed. And then she said a name I recognized immediately. My brain tried to offer excuses before my ears could accept it. Not a stranger. Not a random guy. Not someone I could dismiss. A man I knew. That was the moment everything broke, even though I did not fully understand it yet. The police were there for a traffic incident, but that was not what mattered anymore. The real damage had already been done in my living room, under my roof, with my bare feet on the floor and my wife standing in a towel, holding nothing but silence. The officer continued speaking, explaining next steps, reports, statements, follow-ups. His words blurred together. All I could focus on was the image forming in my head, my wife in her car, at night, with him beside her, living a version of her life that did not include me. I realized then that the knock on the door had not brought the truth into my house. It had simply exposed how long the truth had already been there. And I had been the last one to notice. The officer left after taking her statement, telling us someone would follow up in the coming days. He said it like a routine promise, like this was something people just deal with and move on from. When the door closed behind him, the house felt wrong, like it had shifted an inch off its foundation and nobody wanted to admit it. She finally looked at me then. Not with guilt. Not with panic. With calculation. She started talking immediately, explaining before I could ask anything, filling the silence with words like misunderstanding and coincidence and bad timing. She said she had not planned to be with him. She said it was not what it looked like. She said she was scared and did not know how to tell me. I listened without interrupting, because something in me needed to hear how far she would go to protect the version of herself she wanted me to believe in. The story came out messy, stitched together on the fly. She said she ran into him by chance. She said he needed a ride. She said the accident was minor and she panicked. None of it lined up. The time she gave the officer did not match the time she left the house. The street name she mentioned was nowhere near where she claimed she was going. The friend she referenced did not exist in her contacts. I asked her one question. Why him? She froze again. That hesitation was louder than any confession. She said his name like it was heavy in her mouth, like it meant something she could not fully explain without saying too much. She said he understood her. She said things had been complicated between us lately. She said she felt invisible. That one almost made me laugh. I had built my life around this woman. Long hours at work. Cancelled trips. Missed birthdays with friends. I told myself it was all temporary, all for us. And here she was, standing in front of me, telling me she felt invisible while another man sat in her car, bleeding, after a crash she had tried to run from. I asked how long it had been going on. She said not long. That was lie number 3 I caught without effort. I told her I wanted the truth. All of it. She nodded, tears forming now, perfectly timed, like her body knew when emotion was expected. She admitted they had been talking for months. That it started innocent. That it got complicated. That she did not mean for it to turn into what it did. She did not say love. She did not say affair. She did not say cheating. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water I did not drink. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I thought I would be shaking. Instead, I felt cold and alert, like my system had switched into some kind of survival mode. I asked if anyone else knew. She hesitated. Again. She said no. That was when I realized this was bigger than just the two of them. Secrets do not live in isolation. They spread. They recruit silence. They create witnesses. Over the next 2 days, things unraveled fast. The police called. Insurance got involved. A report surfaced that mentioned previous sightings of her car in that area late at night. Not once. Multiple times. I checked phone records again the next day, this time slower, and noticed gaps that only made sense after I stopped assuming she was telling the truth. I did not find the email account myself. An auto-login notification popped up on our shared laptop while I was working, and I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. I learned more about my wife in 48 hours than I had in the entire time we were married. The man she was with that night was not just someone she knew. He was part of her routine. Her escape. A parallel life she maintained with precision. And then came the part that turned confusion into anger. I found out he had been inside my house. Not that night. Before. I recognized his name in a food delivery receipt. I saw him reflected in a photo she took months earlier that she thought she deleted. A mirror. A shoulder. A familiar silhouette standing in my kitchen. She had let him sit where I sat. Eat what I paid for. Laugh in the space I thought was ours. When I confronted her, she did not deny it. She just cried harder. She said she was sorry. Sorry is a small word for something this deliberate. The worst part was realizing I was not just betrayed. I was managed. Lied to carefully. Pacified. Kept functional while she lived another life inches away from mine. The police investigation continued quietly in the background, but emotionally, I was already in free fall. Every new detail felt like another confirmation that the man I thought I was had been reduced to a placeholder. And I had no idea yet how deep this went. By the third day I stopped sleeping. Not because I was emotional, but because my brain refused to shut down. Every quiet moment filled itself with timelines, details, patterns. I opened her phone records that night and found nothing that made sense. For a moment I honestly thought I was wrong, that I had imagined patterns that were never there, and that scared me more than any proof could have. For a few hours, I honestly thought I might be wrong, and that was the most dangerous moment of all. She tried to act normal. Made coffee. Asked if I had eaten. Touched my arm once like muscle memory was supposed to fix structural damage. I let her do it. Not because I forgave her, but because I didn't know what to say yet, and silence turned out to be useful. That was my first real decision. The police investigation moved slower than the truth. Paperwork always does. But one thing stood out when I finally read the report summary the officer emailed me. The other driver had given a statement. The passenger had two separate interviews. Slight differences. That was the crack. I noticed the name of the officer assigned to follow-up. I noticed the department. I noticed the time of the interviews. And I realized something simple but important. My wife was not the only one who had something to lose here. I reached out to the other driver. Not immediately. I waited 24 hours. Let the shock settle. Let the anger cool into something sharper. I found him through the insurance claim. A middle-aged guy with a family, according to his public records. No criminal history. Clean. He answered my message faster than I expected. He said he had been hoping I would contact him sooner. We talked on the phone that night. No hostility. No drama. Just two men circling the same event from opposite sides, trying to understand what the hell had actually happened. He told me the impact itself was not dramatic, but the passenger in my wife's car had been agitated before it even happened, and had hit his head hard when the cars stopped. He said they were arguing. He said my wife was distracted. He said when the impact happened, she froze, then panicked, then drove away before he could even get out of his car. He also told me something else. The passenger had told him to calm down. Told him everything would be handled. Told him not to worry about insurance because this was not the first time something like this had happened. That line stuck. Not the first time. I never found out exactly what he meant by that. And that uncertainty followed me longer than any detail I could prove. I asked if he had given that part to the police. He said yes. He said he thought it was strange. He said the officer wrote it down but did not react much. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the driveway for almost an hour without moving. I did not feel sad. I felt focused. I did something my wife never expected. I contacted him. Not the other driver. Him. The man whose name cracked my life open. I did not threaten him. I did not accuse him. I sent a neutral message. Direct. Calm. I told him I knew he had been in the car. I told him the police were involved. I told him I wanted to understand the full situation before lawyers started speaking for everyone. He replied the next morning. Short. Polite. Too polite. He said he was sorry for how things turned out. He said it was complicated. He said my wife had told him we were basically separated. He said it in a way that sounded rehearsed, like a line he had used before and expected to work again. That was confirmation number 4. We met in a public place. Coffee shop near a freeway. Bright lights. Cameras. People around. No room for drama. He looked exactly like the kind of man who thinks he is smarter than the consequences of his choices. Confident. Casual. Comfortable explaining himself. At first he denied everything and said I was overreacting, said I should talk to my wife instead of dragging him into my marriage. That lasted until I repeated the officer's words back to him. Passenger statement. Separate interview. His smile faded. Then he stopped denying and started explaining. He told me the affair had been going on longer than she admitted. He told me she talked about leaving me. He told me she said I was emotionally distant, always working, checked out. He also told me something he assumed I already knew. She had been preparing an exit. Money set aside. Documents copied. Accounts slowly shifted. Conversations with a lawyer. Not finalized, but planned. He said she wanted to wait until things were stable. Until it made sense. Until she felt safe. Safe. I asked him why he was willing to tell me this. He hesitated, then said he did not want this to turn into something worse, and that was the first time I realized he was more scared than honest. He said the police situation made him nervous. He said he had his own life to protect. That was when I understood my unexpected ally was not a person. It was leverage. Everyone involved was suddenly afraid of losing control. When I got home, my wife asked where I had been. I told her I needed air. She nodded like she believed me. That night I checked our finances properly for the first time in years. Not casually. Not trusting. Line by line. And I found it. The quiet preparation. The slow bleed. The safety net she had been building behind my back. The affair was not an accident. It was part of a plan. And now I knew enough to stop being the last person in the room. Once you start suspecting a structure behind the lie, you can't stop looking for it. Every conversation becomes data. Every reaction becomes a test. I stopped asking questions not because I was satisfied, but because asking them too soon would have changed everything. The police called again 2 days later and used a phrase that changed everything. This was no longer considered a minor incident. They wanted a formal follow-up interview with my wife. New inconsistencies had come up. The officer mentioned potential charges related to leaving the scene, and for the first time I heard my wife inhale sharply like she understood what that actually meant. The passenger's statement did not align with hers. The other driver had confirmed details that pointed toward distraction, possibly intent to flee. It was no longer a minor incident quietly dissolving into paperwork. It was becoming a problem. My wife pretended to be calm. She said everything would be fine. She said she had nothing to hide. She said the truth was messy but harmless. That was the night I decided to stop being passive. I told her I knew about the account she had opened in her own name months earlier. I told her I knew about the documents she copied. I told her I knew she had spoken to a lawyer. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I just laid out facts in a sequence she could not interrupt. Her face drained of color. She asked how I knew. I told her it did not matter anymore. That broke something in her. Not emotionally. Strategically. She realized I was no longer behind. She realized the version of me she had been managing no longer existed. She tried to shift the narrative. Said she felt trapped. Said she was planning to leave but had not done anything yet. Said the affair was not supposed to explode like this. I told her plans count. Especially when they involve money that is not just yours. She started crying then. Real crying. Fear crying. The kind that comes when consequences stop being abstract. That was when she told me the part she had avoided until she had no other option. The man she was seeing had not just been a comfort. He had been a fallback. Someone who promised stability if things went wrong. Someone who told her she deserved better. Someone who encouraged her to prepare quietly instead of confronting me. And now he was scared. She said he had been calling non-stop since the police visit. Asking what she told them. Asking what I knew. Asking if I planned to press charges or sue or expose him. I asked her one question. If the situation were reversed, what would you do? She could not answer. The climax did not come with yelling or slammed doors. It came with a meeting. I told her we were going to sit down together and call a lawyer. Not hers. Not mine. A neutral one. I told her we would lay everything out. Financials. Timeline. The police situation. The affair. Everything. She resisted at first. Said it was too soon. Said she needed time. I told her time was the thing she had already used up. We sat across from a lawyer the next afternoon. A woman who had clearly seen worse. She asked direct questions. She did not react. She took notes. She explained potential outcomes calmly, without judgment. The police matter complicated everything. Leaving the scene. Passenger involvement. Prior contact between them. It created exposure not just legally, but financially. The lawyer asked if there were witnesses who could contradict her story. I said yes. My wife looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. That was the moment she understood the balance had shifted completely. The affair partner tried to call me that night. I did not answer. I did not need to. For the first time since the knock on the door, I felt steady. Not victorious. Not happy. But grounded. Everything that had been hidden was now on record somewhere. Nothing lived only in whispers anymore. The storm was at its peak. And there was no going back to the version of our life that existed before that knock. The days after that felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful. Just empty in a way that makes sound feel unnecessary. The police situation continued without drama but with consequences. Statements were finalized. Insurance disputes dragged on. Her license was temporarily suspended. Fines followed. Nothing cinematic. Just the slow grind of accountability. The affair ended not with a breakup speech but with fear. He disappeared the moment lawyers entered the picture. Stopped calling. Stopped texting. Deleted accounts. The man who promised stability vanished as soon as instability became real. That part did not surprise me. What surprised me was how little satisfaction I felt. My wife moved into the guest room. Then into a short-term rental nearby. We spoke only when necessary. Logistics. Documents. Dates. No emotional processing. No closure conversations. There was nothing left to clarify. One night she asked if I hated her. I told her no. That confused her more than anger would have. Hate requires energy. I was past that. The marriage did not end in court right away. It dissolved in increments. A signature here. A transfer there. A house that felt less like home every day. We split things cleanly. No dramatic battles. Just the quiet understanding that the story was over. People asked what happened. I gave simple answers. We grew apart. Things changed. I learned quickly that most people do not want the truth. They want something they can nod at and move on from. Sometimes late at night I replay the knock in my head. Not the sound itself, but the version of me that opened the door. The man who still believed his life was stable. The man who trusted silence more than evidence. I do not miss her. I miss who I thought I was. Betrayal does not make you stronger. It makes you more precise. You stop romanticizing sacrifice. You stop confusing loyalty with blindness. You stop assuming that time invested guarantees honesty in return. I did not win. But I was no longer losing without knowing it. That is the part people never talk about. The real damage is not the affair or the lies or even the humiliation. It is the time you spend living inside a version of reality someone else controls. When that control breaks, it hurts. But it also frees you. I still think about the question she could not answer. What would you do if this were reversed? I think I know now. I would tell the truth before the knock. And if you are listening to this and something in your life feels off but manageable, uncomfortable but familiar, ask yourself one thing. If a police officer knocked on your door tonight and said a name you trust, would you be shocked? Or would everything suddenly make sense? Because that answer matters more than people think. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. More stories like this are coming.